into In the City expecting Bravo to give me what Bravo has always given me. Beautiful people, expensive apartments, questionable relationship decisions, and at least one person getting disproportionately angry about something that absolutely did not need to become a screaming situation. And to be fair, the show has all of those things, but the more I watched it, the more I realized that I think the actual problem within the city is that Bravo has followed these people into adulthood without quite figuring out what kind of reality television adulthood is supposed to be. Because Summer House had a pretty simple premise. Take a bunch of attractive people, put them in a house together, give them alcohol, and let their friendships, hookups, and unresolved emotional issues generate the plot. And it worked because the house was basically their entire social world. But In the City is following these same people at a point where the house isn't really their world anymore. They have careers, marriages, babies, families, and lives that exist completely independently of the Bravo social ecosystem. Lindsay has a baby, Yvonne is married, Amanda is technically married, and then there's Georgina, who has her own dermatology practice and somehow feels like she wandered onto the show from an entirely different genre of television. That's why the show feels so strange in my opinion. Bravo is still trying to manufacture the same kind of social drama around people whose lives aren't really organized around that social drama anymore. The old Summer House conflict is basically, you did something to me. You slept with somebody, you said something behind my back, you didn't invite me somewhere, you took the bedroom I wanted, etc. But the conflict in the City is increasingly, we have fundamentally different lives now. And that's much harder to turn into Bravo television. Kenny and Whitney are a good example. I actually kind of like Kenny, but this man is so defensive about his relationship. And Gavin, who I love, basically reads him for filth when he points out that Whitney isn't as dramatic or exciting as the women Kenny is used to. And Kenny gets defensive because, unfortunately, sometimes the thing that makes you the angriest is the thing that is a little bit true. Gavin isn't really saying Whitney is boring though. He's pointing out that Kenny seems accustomed to relationships where the drama itself is part of the attraction. That's not really a Summer House problem, that's an adulthood problem. And I kept noticing that I gravitated toward the people who seem to have a life outside the show. I love Georgina. Part of why I love her is that I completely believe that if Bravo stopped filming tomorrow, Georgina would just go back to running her dermatology practice. I also love Andrea. This man is setting the table. He's just chilling. He's domestic. He's competent. He's putting plates down like a grown-ass adult. What a concept. And I actually liked a lot of the scenes where nothing particularly dramatic was happening. Friendsgivings, weddings, family reunions, dinners, even the apple orchard. At one point, I literally thought, I know the point of the show is drama, but can we please just have one nice quiet dinner where everyone is happy? And then they actually had one at Friendsgiving, and I was like, oh, this is nice. I don't think that means I suddenly want wholesome reality television, though. I think it means that the cast's actual relationships are becoming more interesting than the show's conflict engine. Lindsay's a good example. Yvonne talks about how Lindsay having a baby changed her and therefore changed their friendship, and that genuinely made me sad. Because that's a very normal adult experience. Sometimes your friend has a baby or gets married or starts a business and suddenly you're just not living the same life anymore. There isn't necessarily a villain, you're just growing in different directions. Of course, Lindsay then hijacks Yvonne's wedding dinner to yell at Kyle and Amanda, and I'm like, girl, I agree with you. They piss me off too, but this is somebody else's wedding dinner. You are actively feeding the exact drama you are complaining about. And then we get to Whitney's single mom discourse, which I hated. You cannot tell a single mom that she has it easy because some other single moms have it worse. Parenting is hard, period. I hate the idea that we need to start adding qualifiers to determine whether somebody's particular version of motherhood is sufficiently difficult to count. But the clearest example of Bravo struggling to adapt to these people's adulthood is Amanda and Kyle. Not because I particularly care whether they stay together. At this point, I would actually like them to break up so we can all move on with our lives. Like, these two have the energy of Beth and Jerry from Rick and Morty, you know what I mean? What's interesting is that their marriage has become one of the central dramatic engines of a show that's supposedly about these people moving beyond the Summer House lifestyle. And honestly, it's the most boring part of the season. This is supposed to be huge television. We're supposed to care whether they reconcile. We're supposed to wonder if they're going to save their marriage. And I'm sitting here like, can we please just get back to Georgina? Because their conflict isn't really social anymore. It's structural. They seem to want fundamentally different lives, and I don't think there's some magical piece of communication they're missing. I think they should break up. Then Kyle accuses Amanda of being unfaithful, and Amanda's face is fascinating. That is the face of somebody who who has suddenly realized that the conversation is about to become much more complicated than she expected. And then Kyle talks about not wanting to give the fans false hope about them reconciling, and I was like, y'all have fans who want you two together? Who are these people? Because I'm not rooting for reconciliation. I'm rooting for the season finale. The apple orchard is a perfect example of the show's weird transition. There's this part where like Kyle asks Amanda, do you want to win or do you want to lose? And Amanda says, I want to lose. And Kyle responds, that's the difference between you and me. And I'm like, yes, correct. That is absolutely the difference between a married couple who should keep working on their relationship and a married couple who should probably stop making each other miserable. But it's also funny watching the show try to turn an apple orchard competition into relationship drama, because it really does feel like Bravo is desperately searching for the old summer house formula. The problem though is that these people aren't 25-year-olds whose entire lives happen in one giant house anymore. They're adults. Kenny is reconnecting with his dad. Lindsay is raising a child. People are getting married. They're building careers. They're figuring out how to maintain friendships when their lives no longer look anything like they used to. And those things don't always produce explosive television. Sometimes they just produce a nice dinner. That being said, I don't think the cast has outgrown reality television. Rather, I think they've outgrown this particular reality television format. Summer House worked because the cast shared a lifestyle. In the City doesn't really have that anymore. The City isn't a house. Everyone can go home. Everyone has their own life. And the older these people get, the more those lives diverge. So Bravo has to keep finding reasons to put them in the same room. And when it works, it's great. But when it doesn't, you get 12 minutes of people fighting over a bedroom. And maybe that's the most interesting thing about In the City. The cast's lives are becoming more interesting than the show built around them. They're becoming parents, spouses, business owners, and friends who are trying to figure out how to stay friends when their lives don't look the same anymore. Bravo just hasn't quite figured out how to make that the show yet.